Shalom, can you explain to everyone who might not know what are alternative app stores and how do they differ from the more traditional Apple App Store and Google Play?
Sure. So in general, traditional app stores are all the app stores that are not in Google Play and Apple Store. And basically, there are more than hundreds of applications out there. Alternative stores give different benefits to developers by giving lower fees. Today, every developer that is working with Google and Apple has to pay around 30% from their in-app purchases fees to Google and Apple. And alternative stores give the value of paying lower fees and generating much more revenues for the developers. In addition to that, there is much more discoverability opportunities. Today, within the stores, you have between 4 to 5 million applications out there. And it's really hard to find new application unless it's by big major developer or very promoted. It's really hard to find different new applications, and stores, alternative stores, have lower applications and enable to find new applications and get more content out to the user.
Okay, and there's all this talk about making our digital marketplaces more equitable. The EU's just released a Digital Markets Act. Do you think that will affect how much alternative app stores are adopted?
Yes, 100%. It's actually a very important stage. And the reason, in general, up until now, in the past decade, alternative stores did exist on Android. However, there were many alternative stores relatively in the APAC region. And the revenue proposition for app developers that have integrated those alternative stores in the past decade were relatively meaningless. They weren't just generating enough revenues for developers, so the question was, well, what's going to happen? Now, by opening the European market with the DMA, Digital Marketing Act, actually developers can integrate alternative stores in key European markets and get lower fees for those in-app purchases. And that should grow their developer revenues in a serious way.
So you mentioned developers. So what sort of issues, if at all, do you think developers will face if adopting alternative app stores?
There are a few things that developers are there are different phases among different developers. Some of the developers were putting resources in investigation stage. That means finding what is the opportunity of this ecosystem and whether it's worth for them to get into it. Most of them have understood, and by the survey that we have released around a few months ago, we have surveyed 200 developers, leading developers, and they told us that alternative distribution, alternative stores is actually part of their growth strategy. So developers want to invest into alternative stores and alternative distribution. And basically what we see is that now the phase of integrations and understanding who are the main partners to integrate with is the not challenge, but is actually the component that developers are facing with. How long does it take to integrate? Who are the main partners? How the revenues will look like, and how this ecosystem will evolve with user acquisition are the main key areas that developers are now looking to get more clarity in and move forward.
So on the topic of developers, so what are some of the main challenges and benefits that developers face within the alternative app store realm?
Sure. So the biggest benefit that developers face as a fundamental part is the economic value. Now developers can pay less, lower fees, and generate more revenues. And that's, of course, the most fundamental and the most important thing to most developers. In addition to that, they can diversify their revenue streams. So think about that now, currently, most of the developers generate revenues from Google Play and iOS and Apple. In addition to that, we would like to increase and grow a third column, which is alternative distribution or direct to consumer. And this column should be growing steadily quarter over quarter. And that also will allow developers to have diversification of the revenue streams in terms of, in case of risks or anything in the future. In addition to that, one of the biggest things is benefits is a user growth. We have surveyed more than 200 developers in the past few months, and we have seen that 80% of those developers said that number one moving factor, indicating factor for them to move into alternative stores is user growth. And that's important because, again, in the world of CPIs increasing and monetization decreasing, developers need to find new channels to find new users, and that's actually ticking their box. And in terms of challenges, I would say that most of the challenges we see today is the integration phase, is the investigation into who are the main players within the ecosystem and how they can benefit on creating this integration and what will be the outcome after they go live. And that's something that we speak with developers in regards to general realization that having an application with custom APK in the store is not enough. You always have to invest into user acquisition. Alternative user acquisition is the key here.
With alternative app stores, how do you think user acquisition and distribution through alternative app stores will sort of boost the success of mobile games?
Sure. And that's actually, that's a great question because it relies to the previous statement about, alternative stores being available in the industry in the past decade. The fact that alternative stores were there but were not necessarily generating revenues for developers generates a question. Why? Why, if alternative stores are there, and that's even APAC region, why they did not generate revenues? You have different stores like Amazon, like Samsung Galaxy, and many others. And the catch over here is that it was hard to create user acquisition. Today on Google Play and Apple, when you would like to run an application and to release an application, you have to invest into user acquisition. It's really hard to get an application from organic downloads only. And if you have to invest into user acquisition, how do you do user acquisition for alternative distribution, for custom APKs? And up until now, there were no right technologies. We're basically currently in a perfect storm that consists of three pillars. The one is developers' needs. Developers would like to continue growing. In the past several years, we have seen that the CPIs have been increasing and the monetization has been decreasing. And developers need to continue growing, but how they will be growing in this ecosystem? So they have maybe to integrate and find new pillars. The second is, different regulation changes. Regulation changes like DMA enables key markets to open up for alternative stores and alternative distribution. And the third one is technological opportunities. There are technologies right now that exist that enable alternative distribution, alternative user acquisition at scale. So think about if you're working with a telco, for example, and you have a technology like single tap, you basically enable finally to run alternative user acquisition at scale. And why it's important? Because alternative APKs, it's really hard to do user acquisition. You create massive friction between the user to the download, around 4 to 5 clicks. So single tap can decrease it to 1 and 2 and create a massive scale of adoption for alternative APKs.
Last question for you here, Shalom, on salon monetization. What sort of innovative monetization techniques do you think will maximize reach, revenue when it comes to alternative app stores?
That's a great question. I think that the answer is that developers have much more choice right now. And what do I mean by choice is that if up until now developers were selling 10 coins, for example, for $10, now the developer can sell the same 10 coins for maybe $7. It can sell in a lower price, so the value goes to the user. Or the developer maybe can give more coins for the same $10 to the user. So there are different benefits that the developers can work around different audiences because different users had different needs and they can get different values by implementing the right monetization strategy across the needs of the user. In addition to that, I think that there are other areas of embedding ads also within the environment. So if a developer that was relying heavily on IAP is now increasing their IAP revenues, and up until now we're very much aggressive on the ad side in terms of ad monetization, now potentially when the revenues are increasing, might in theory generate less aggressiveness on the ad side and maybe embedding more brand advertisements that create much longer retention with the user, that enables those users to engage, play with the ads, and that also indirectly affect their developers' ability to go and invest money into new user acquisition. Because when you are sometimes very aggressive with advertisements, it creates churn, and churn in reaction create more investment and more cost into UA. So those kind of things that developers can start having now, there's a lot of data that they will have to face with because different audiences, different users will be reacting differently. They will have to analyze it and create an approach that will be relevant for different users at the right time.